Have you ever had one of those afternoons where the world feels steady and familiar, only for a single conversation to pull the rug out from under everything you believed about the people closest to you? Where the loyalty you had counted on turns out to be nothing more than a convenient illusion woven from half-truths and hidden motives. That is precisely how my own unraveling began. And even now, months later, I find myself sitting here, reflecting on it, with a kind of quiet clarity that only comes after you have chosen yourself completely. My name is Natalie Harper. I am 29 years old. I built my financial consulting firm from the ground up right here in the Bayside waterfront community of Annapolis, Maryland. It is the kind of place where the water laps gently against private docks, and the elite estates line the shore like silent guardians of old money and newer ambitions. My days used to revolve around helping clients navigate complex portfolios, balancing ledgers, and making sure families like mine did not fall apart over money. Funny how life has a way of turning your expertise back on you. That crisp October afternoon started like any other. I had been feeling off for a couple of weeks, tightness in my chest, a persistent fatigue that no amount of strong coffee could shake. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me schedule a checkup at the Waterfront Medical Center, a short drive from my office. The clinic overlooked the bay with wide windows that let in the soft light reflecting off the water. I sat in the examination room in my tailored navy slacks and crisp white blouse, trying to stay calm as Dr. Sarah Nguyen reviewed my chart. She was thorough and kind, the kind of doctor who made you feel heard rather than rushed. "We are going to run some additional tests, Natalie," she said gently, her voice steady. "The symptoms you are describing could be stress-related, but we need to rule out anything cardiac. You have been carrying a heavy load between the firm and family obligations." I nodded, offering her a small smile. Independent and strong, that is how I'd always described myself, even when the weight of it all pressed down harder than I let on. My husband and I had two beautiful children, my daughter, who was 5, and full of endless questions about the boats on the bay, and my son, who was 7, and already showing a knack for numbers, just like his mother. We lived in a comfortable home, not far from the water, close enough to the elite estates where my mother-in-law resided in one of those sprawling waterfront properties that had been in her family for generations. Or so I had been led to believe. The door to the exam room opened without a knock. In walked my mother-in-law, her silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed, and her tailored jacket looking as if she had stepped straight from a board meeting. She was not on the schedule. She was not even supposed to know I was here. Yet there she was, clutching a designer handbag and fixing me with that familiar look of practiced concern mixed with something sharper underneath. "Natalie," she said, her voice carrying that smooth authority she always used when she wanted to steer a conversation. "I heard from my son that you were having some health issues. I came straight over. We cannot have you falling apart right now, not with everything going on with the family assets." I blinked, caught completely off guard. The room felt smaller. Suddenly, the bay view outside the window no longer soothing. Dr. Nguyen excused herself, politely sensing the shift in the air, but not before giving me a quick, reassuring glance. My mother-in-law closed the door behind her and sat down on the edge of the chair opposite me without being invited. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my tone even. I'd always prided myself on staying composed, especially around her. She waved a hand dismissively, as if my question was beside the point. "My son mentioned the doctor visit. He is worried, of course. We all are. But more importantly, we need to talk about the Waterfront Trust. You know how delicate the estate situation has been. The family holdings have been under pressure, and your signature on those asset transfer papers is essential to keep things stable. My son has been handling most of it, but with your health scare today, we cannot afford any delays." Her words landed like a quiet blow. The waterfront estate, my mother-in-law's pride, the Bayside property that anchored so much of our family life, had always been presented to me as secure, debt-free, a legacy she and my husband assured me was protected. They had told me repeatedly that any financial help I provided through my firm was just temporary support, nothing more. My husband had even joked about it over dinner one night, saying the estate was rock solid and that my expertise was simply making sure the books stayed clean. I had believed them. I had poured hours into reviewing statements, quietly transferring funds when they hinted at shortfalls, all while running my own business and raising our children. Now in this sterile exam room with the scent of antiseptic and the distant call of gulls outside, the illusion cracked wide open. I looked directly at her. "What exactly are you asking me to sign?" My husband told me the estate was fine. No liens, no major debts. "That is what you both said." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing just enough to show the steel beneath the concern. "Details? Natalie, you have always been so focused on the numbers. The truth is, there have been some adjustments. The estate needed liquidity, and my son and I made decisions to protect the family. Your involvement has been crucial, but now we need you to formalize it. For the children's sake, for all of us." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so certain I would simply fall in line, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the medical center's air conditioning. My husband, the man who had promised to stand beside me through everything, had apparently been part of this. He had lied about the assets, about the true state of the waterfront holdings, letting me believe my contributions were supportive gestures rather than the quiet enabling of something far more calculated. I felt my chest tighten again, not from any new symptom, but from the weight of what was unfolding. Dr. Nguyen returned briefly to recommend rest and follow-up tests, emphasizing that stress was likely a major factor. My mother-in-law nodded along as if she were the concerned guardian, but I saw the calculation in her posture. She was already reaching for her phone, no doubt texting my husband to coordinate. After she left, promising to check in later with that same smooth tone, I sat alone for a long moment, staring out at the rippling bay. The water looked peaceful, indifferent to the storm brewing in my life. I thought about my daughter and my son waiting at home with their sitter, their innocent laughter, the one constant I could still count on. I thought about my firm, the one I had built with late nights, and careful risks, my business partner Amanda Sullivan always there with steady advice, and a shared cup of coffee during crunch times. How had I let this go on? Later that evening, back at our house, overlooking a quieter stretch of the water, I tried to talk to my husband. He came home from whatever meeting had kept him late, loosening his tie and offering me a quick kiss on the forehead, as if nothing had changed. "Heard you saw my mother at the clinic?" he said, casually opening the refrigerator. "She is just looking out for the family, Natalie. The estate stuff is complicated, but we have it under control." "Under control," I replied, my voice calm but firm. She made it sound urgent. "You both told me the assets were secure, that my help was just bridging a gap." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes as he poured a glass of water. "It is not a big deal. Loyalty means trusting the bigger picture sometimes. You are strong, Natalie, you always have been. That is why we knew you could handle it." His words hung in the air between us, laced with that familiar mix of affection and deflection. In that moment, the loyalty I had built my marriage and family life around felt paper thin, like it could tear at the slightest pressure. I did not push further that night. I tucked my daughter and my son into bed, listening to their sleepy stories about school and the boats they saw on the bay, and I let the quiet reflection settle over me. But inside, something had shifted. The health scare had not just been about my body. It had exposed the fragile loyalties holding everything together. The following morning brought another layer to the unfolding situation. My phone buzzed early while I was reviewing client portfolios at the firm, the caller ID showing my mother-in-law's name. I answered with the same composed tone I reserved for professional calls, but her voice came through with that practiced blend of concern and direction she wielded so effectively. "Natalie, I wanted to follow up after yesterday. How are you feeling?" My son and I discussed the papers overnight, and we really need to get those signatures sorted this week. The waterfront estate adjustments cannot wait with the current pressures on the holdings. It is for all of us, including the children's future stability. I listened as she outlined the details in her smooth, authoritative way, mentioning adjustments to trusts and asset reallocations that sounded necessary on the surface, but carried an undercurrent of expectation. She tied it back to my health, suggesting that reducing my stress by finalizing everything would be the best path forward. You have always been so independent handling your firm and the family responsibilities with such strength, she added. This is just one more way we can all support each other. Her words were carefully chosen, framing the request as a collective benefit rather than a demand. Yet the pressure built steadily, making the bay view from my office window seem a touch more distant. I agreed to review the documents she planned to send over, hanging up with a quiet sigh that reflected the growing weight of what this all meant. The loyalty I had counted on from my husband and my mother-in-law now appeared threaded with omissions, the kind that left me questioning the very ground we stood on together. By midday, the follow-up from the medical center arrived in the form of a call from Dr. Sarah Nguyen. She reviewed the initial test results over the phone, her voice professional, yet reassuring, as she noted that while nothing immediately alarming had shown up, the combination of symptoms pointed strongly toward stress as a significant factor. We will monitor it closely, she said, but finding ways to ease the load in your personal life could make a real difference. I thanked her and ended the call sitting back in my chair with a moment of reflection. The health scare had not been dramatic, but it had illuminated the loyalties in sharp relief, exposing how my husband and my mother-in-law had leaned on my stability while keeping certain truths about the estate tucked away. It felt like the pieces of a larger picture were shifting, and I needed clarity before signing anything that could alter our family's path. That afternoon, a message from my best friend Lauren Morgan popped up on my phone, pulling me from a stack of reports. Lauren had been my confidant since our early days in Annapolis, the one who always offered straightforward perspective without judgment. We had shared countless coffees overlooking the water, talking through career moves and family ups and downs. Her text was brief, but urgent. Got something you need to see right away? Meet at our usual spot by the harbor in 30 minutes, if you can. I rearranged my schedule with Amanda's help and headed out the drive along the bayside roads, giving me space to breathe and reflect on how quickly things had tilted. Lauren was waiting at the small waterfront cafe we favored, a quiet corner table, with views of the sailboats bobbing gently. She slid a thick envelope across the table as soon as I sat down, her expression serious, but supportive. I did not want to alarm you over the phone, but after what you told me about the clinic and the asset papers, I reached out to Kevin Torres, that private investigator I mentioned a while back, who handles discreet financial reviews. She explained, keeping her voice low. He pulled together a preliminary report on the waterfront estate holdings. Natalie, you need to read this before you sign anything. It shows the lies run deeper than we thought. I opened the envelope with steady hands, though my mind raced in quiet turmoil. The report from Kevin Torres laid out the details in clear documented pages, hidden liens on portions of the estate that my husband and my mother-in-law had never disclosed, secret transfers of funds that had been presented to me as minor adjustments, but amounted to substantial reallocations without my full knowledge. The documents revealed that the assets I had helped support through my firm's expertise were not as secure as I had been led to believe. Instead, they had been leveraged in ways that positioned me to absorb more risk than I had ever agreed to. Lauren watched me process it, her presence a calm anchor amid the instability I felt building inside. This is not just about paperwork, she said softly. It is about the loyalty you thought was there. The report proves they knew about these issues and chose not to be transparent. The revelation hit with a quiet force, the kind that did not shatter everything at once, but reframed every conversation I had shared with my husband and my mother-in-law over the past months. Here was the proof laid out in black and white from a trusted source that the illusion of mutual support had been carefully maintained, while the true state of the assets remained obscured. I thanked Lauren, feeling a mix of gratitude and the unsteady churn of what this meant for my family. She squeezed my hand before I left, reminding me that I did not have to navigate this alone. Back at the firm, I confided briefly in Amanda about the report, and she suggested consulting our lawyer, Rachel Fletcher, who had handled several complex client matters for us in the past. I scheduled a call with Rachel for the next day, her expertise in estate and financial agreements, exactly what I needed to understand my options. As the afternoon wore on, another message arrived from my mother-in-law, this one more insistent, about finalizing the signatures soon. The pressure mounted steadily, yet the private investigator report had armed me with a clearer view of the deceptions. My husband texted later, echoing her urgency and framing it once more as a family necessity. The health follow-up appointment loomed as well, a reminder that the stress of these hidden truths was taking its toll. I reflected on it all as I drove home that evening, the bay lights beginning to twinkle along the shoreline. The loyalty I had once seen as rock solid now stood exposed as something far more illusory, built on omissions that served their interests more than ours as a couple or a family. My daughter and my son greeted me with their usual warmth. When I walked through the door, their innocent energy, a bittersweet contrast to the decisions weighing on me. I tucked them in with stories of the boats on the water, but my mind lingered on the report and the conversation I knew was coming. The next morning brought a new development when Rachel Fletcher called me back promptly after reviewing the documents I had forwarded. Her voice was measured and professional as she walked me through the implications, confirming that the asset transfers carried risks I had not been fully informed about. "This changes the landscape significantly," she noted. "You have grounds to pause and reassess before committing to anything." Her advice aligned with the quiet resolve building within me, the independent strength that had always defined how I approached challenges. Yet even as I processed her words, a fresh message from my mother-in-law arrived, pressing for an in-person meeting to discuss the papers and tying it back to concerns about my health. The escalation felt sudden, the karma of truth beginning to stir in ways I could sense, but not yet fully see. Business audits on related holdings had been mentioned in passing by Kevin Torres in the report, hinting at further exposures on the horizon if things continued unchecked. I sat at my desk once more, the waterfront view a steady companion to my thoughts, weighing the proof in my hands against the expectations closing in. The illusion of loyalty had cracked wide open, and the path forward demanded choices I had never anticipated making. What came next would test everything I believed about family and self-preservation. But for the first time, I felt the quiet power of seeing the full picture clearly. The very next morning, the firm's usual rhythm shifted in an unexpected way when my business partner, Amanda Sullivan, stepped into my office with a concerned expression. She had just received a call from an auditor named Nicole Ramirez, who specialized in reviewing complex estate-linked financials for high-net-worth clients in our Bayside community. Nicole had been brought in through a routine compliance check on one of the waterfront holdings tied to my family's interests, and the initial findings had prompted an immediate, deeper review. Amanda closed the door behind her and handed me the preliminary summary Nicole had forwarded. "This came through faster than expected," she said softly. Nicole mentioned some discrepancies that line up with what you shared about the private investigator report. "It looks like the asset adjustments were more layered than anyone let on." I read through the auditor's notes with the same calm focus I brought to every client portfolio, though my heart settled into a reflective steadiness rather than panic. The business audit exposed additional undisclosed transfers and leveraged portions of the estate that my husband and my mother-in-law had never mentioned in any of our conversations. What they had presented as minor restructurings for family stability now appeared as deliberate maneuvers to shift risk onto my side of the ledger while maintaining appearances of security. Nicole's report was thorough and professional, highlighting how these moves had been structured to avoid immediate scrutiny, and it confirmed the private investigator's findings in even sharper detail. The karma of sudden exposure felt almost poetic in its timing striking. Just as the pressure for my signature had intensified, yet it brought no triumphant rush, only a deeper layer of quiet clarity about the deceptions that had been woven around me. Later that afternoon, my mother-in-law arranged a meeting at her waterfront estate, the Grand Bayside property that had always symbolized the family legacy she guarded so carefully. My husband insisted we go together, framing it as a chance to clear the air and move forward as a united front. We arrived under the soft glow of the late October sun, reflecting off the water, the air carrying the faint saltiness of the bay. My mother-in-law greeted us in the sunlit sitting room overlooking the private dock, her posture as composed as ever. But I noticed the slight tension in her shoulders when she saw the folder I carried from the auditor. "Natalie, I am glad you could make it," she said, her voice smooth with that familiar authority. "We need to finalize these transfers today. The estate requires your cooperation to keep everything protected for the children." My husband nodded beside me, placing a hand lightly on my arm in what I once would have seen as supportive reassurance. "She is right. We have been managing this together, and with your health concerns, wrapping this up will ease the stress for everyone." Their words flowed with the same practiced concern they had used since the clinic visit. But now they landed against the backdrop of the private investigator report and the auditor's findings. I listened reflectively, letting the bay's gentle lapping against the pilings fill the brief silences before responding in the calm tone that had become my anchor. "I've reviewed the documents carefully," I said, my voice even and measured, along with the private investigator's report and the recent business audit from Nicole Ramirez. The assets were not as secure as you both described. The lies about the true state of the holdings have been clear for some time now. My husband shifted uncomfortably, and my mother-in-law's expression tightened, but I continued without raising my voice. "I will not be signing anything that further exposes me or our children to those risks. The loyalty I thought we shared was built on half-truths, and I see that now." The conversation unfolded in quiet waves, rather than raised voices, the kind of exchange where every word carried the weight of months of unspoken omissions. My mother-in-law leaned forward, emphasizing how the family had always counted on my strength and independence to navigate these matters. My husband echoed her points, reminding me of the promises we had made to build a stable life for my daughter and my son. Yet as they spoke, a delivery arrived at the estate, an envelope from a local courier that my mother-in-law had apparently been expecting. She opened it with a slight hesitation, then handed a single handwritten letter to me, her eyes avoiding mine. "This might help explain things," she murmured. The letter was from my husband's late father, written years earlier, but only now surfaced in some estate paperwork. It detailed how the waterfront holdings had been quietly managed through a series of strategic deceptions to preserve appearances, with explicit instructions to involve me only when necessary for financial support, never full transparency. The hidden letter changed everything in that moment. Confirming the core secret I had begun to suspect, the loyalty within our family had been pure illusion, sustained by careful lies about the assets and my role in sustaining them. It was not a dramatic revelation that shattered the room, but a quiet confirmation that reframed every assurance they had ever given me. I folded the letter carefully, feeling a bittersweet ache settle in my chest as the full scope of the betrayal crystallized. In the reflective silence that followed, I made my decision with the independent strength that had defined me long before any of this. I am setting clear boundaries here, and now I told them both, my tone calm, yet unwavering. No more involvement in the estate transfers. No more quiet support that masks the truth. I will protect what I have built for myself and our children, and that means stepping back from this dynamic entirely. My husband looked at me with a mixture of surprise and quiet resignation, while my mother-in-law's face reflected a flicker of something deeper than frustration. Perhaps the realization that her carefully maintained control was slipping. There were no explosive arguments, only the unresolved tension that hung in the air like the bay mist at dusk, the kind that lingers without easy resolution. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded in their own measured pace. I consulted further with my lawyer, Rachel Fletcher, who helped me formalize the separation of our financial entanglements and ensured my firm remained protected. The business audit continued under Nicole Ramirez's oversight, exposing additional layers, but I chose not to pursue any broader confrontation. Instead, I focused on the quiet routines that brought peace mornings with my daughter and my son watching the boats from our home. Afternoons at the firm, collaborating with Amanda Sullivan on client strategies and occasional reflective walks along the waterfront, where the water's steady rhythm mirrored the calm I was cultivating within. My best friend Lauren Morgan had been a steady source of support through the private investigator report and the early revelations. But as the family drama spilled into broader circles in our close-knit Bayside community, she began to distance herself slightly, citing her own need to avoid the tension it created in her life and business. Even my business partner, Amanda, while professional and kind, pulled back from deeper personal conversations to keep the firm's focus clear. The trusted allies who had once felt like constants now created a subtle, emotional isolation, a final loss that underscored how choosing myself meant standing more alone than I had expected. Yet in that isolation, boundaries brought a profound sense of peace I had not known before. The health scare that had first exposed the loyalties had ultimately guided me toward this path of self-preservation. I no longer carried the weight of unspoken deceptions or the quiet enabling of illusions. There was no sweeping karma that toppled everything dramatically, no triumphant reclamation of the estate or public vindication, only the bittersweet freedom of knowing I had chosen myself without guilt. The unresolved tension with my mother-in-law and my husband lingered like the distant horizon over the bay, a reminder that some family fractures do not heal neatly or quickly. But in choosing to walk away from the patterns that no longer served me, I found space to breathe, to reflect, and to build a life rooted in my own strength, rather than borrowed loyalties. Sitting here now, looking out at the same waterfront that once symbolized so much complication, I feel the quiet power of that choice every day. The loyalty I once believed in was indeed pure illusion, but recognizing it allowed me to reclaim my own path. If you are facing similar moments where hidden truths test the foundations of your closest relationships, remember that setting boundaries is not about punishment or victory. It is about choosing yourself without guilt and discovering the peace that comes with it, even when the road ahead feels uncertain and a bit lonely. Thank you for listening to my story. What would you choose in a situation like this?